Hello, welcome to Manager World Summit. I'm your host, Jose Luis Romero. Today, I'm thrilled because we have two speakers, Peter Di Giamarino, professional CEO and founder of Intelliven, author of the book, Manage to Lead, 7 Truths to Help You Change the World, and Adam Boone, principal consultant at Intelliven and marketing strategist. Intelliven is a management consulting firm that leads companies to achieve outsized growth. I repeat, outsized growth. For example, Intelliven helped a startup to grow to 1 billion, that's with a B, 1,010,000 employees. Another example, it helped an internet unit spin out from a larger company to grow and eventually to sell for 300 million.
All right, today we'll look at how a lack of shared understanding and alignment across leaders can hamper organization performance, and how a simple approach to achieving what we call strategic clarity can bring leaders into alignment for strong performance. The source of our content today comes from Manage to Lead, which is an integrated system developed by a team of successful operators. And it's gone on to be vetted and advanced by leading business and organization development academics. MTL aligns executive teams in any organization and provides best practice tools, methods, and principles for leading both operations and planned change by participating in hands-on academy or by working side by side in an initiative accelerator. So the key thing that you may already have a feel for this, but one of the things we've learned over time is that leader alignment is critical to the success of any organization. Think of it like this. An organization is the consciously coordinated activities of 2 or more people in which tasks are distributed for a collective goal. You've seen this organization chart type picture to show how the compartments of an organization and how they link together. Did you know the word organization comes from the Greek organon, which is derived from ergon, which is organ. What it means is a compartment for a particular job. So what happens to the human body if one of its organs fails to operate in sync with the rest? Well, the unaligned organs kill their host, or the body, the person. What happens in an organization if one of the organizational units doesn't perform in a way that is in sync with the others? Same thing. The corpus or the corporate body dies. So we find that if you go back to basics, this comes from it's totally consistent with something that Peter Drucker once said, which is that every business exists to solve a problem for a customer. Sounds simple, but what we find is it actually drives the need to understand 3 very important things all at the same time. What does the organization provide? To whom? And why does the one who can benefit from the offering choose to buy it from you? So we get a triptych here. So the market, problem, solution. Who is the customer? What problem do they have? And what is our solution? Make sense? But it's hard to think about 3 things all at once. If you just try to do that yourself, 3 different things, it's just very difficult to do. And if you can do it, it's hard to do it for very long. So what happens is you might get there and then you kind of slip into letting one of them go or 2 of them go and just focusing on what we call escape to competence, the thing you're most comfortable with. The other thing that I found was that it's often any given organization will be swirling in WWWs. So they have, in fact, many different businesses, and essentially they're running a portfolio company with many different businesses in it. And it's so difficult to build a successful business that it's hard, it's so hard to build one. Why would you think you could build 3 or 5? So because especially in a startup situation, it really makes sense to pick one to focus on, to work on, and that you can be successful with. So that was the root of it, and it's really worked well. We came up with a template that asks 3 questions. What is it you provide? What product or service do you deliver? To whom? And by whom, we don't mean what industry or what company, but what person in the organization is the one who makes the decision to purchase what you provide? And then why do they do that? Is it better, cheaper, faster? Is it a solution to an important, pervasive, and persistent problem? So that's the template we use to get started. And Adam, you want to take us through this example here?
Yeah, definitely. So as Peter just showed you, that template, we call it the WWW template, becomes the heart of this exercise to, number one, test the alignment of your leaders in the organization, and number two, work toward alignment. You know, the idea is that you use that WWW template, and typically the first step is to have each of the leaders go off on their own and fill it out with their own views of what the 3 Ws are. And that then initial sort of benchmark or starting point can show how divergent everyone is. Then really, you know, the point of that is to think about and understand how those differences that you see impact the operating and the performance of the organization. If they're not in alignment, then the activities of the people below these leaders will not be in alignment. So here's the example. It's a financial technology company, a software company. The CEO thinks that they make a financial workflow solution for Fortune 500 CFOs. Why do people buy it from this company? Because they're the market leader. That's what the CEO thinks. The COO thinks, oh, okay, it's a cloud finance platform. Who buys it? Any company can use it. And why? Because it has high uptime. It's always available, right? The CMO has yet a different view. It's software for CPAs, and they use it because it's a trusted brand that they know. And then the CTO thinks, all right, it's an automated balance sheet. It's used mainly by expense managers, and they do it because it has such great code, such great programming, right? Now,
I love that example.
yeah. Now here's the kicker, right? None of these people is wrong. All of them have a true viewpoint. All of these elements are true in some way, shape, or form. The difference is they're looking at things through their own lens, right? They have their own biases. They have their own ways of understanding the business. That's based on their backgrounds. It's based on their education. And it's especially based on their tasks and roles that they're involved in the organization today. You know, market-facing people will tend to think of the brand or the reputation of the company as most important in driving business. But the technical and the ops people may be thinking about feature sets. They may be thinking about technical issues like uptime as the most important. The overriding point here is that these views don't match up. And what that means is, for example, your marketers in the marketing organization will not be selling the same thing that the engineers are building. And that's a real problem. And that's one of many problems that this misalignment will
Very
result
common
in.
problem.
Yes, it absolutely is.
So well, actually, Adam, did you want to conclude by saying what the options are for the team?
Yeah, right. So what do you do if this alignment is there? Well, the standard way of dealing with it is to do nothing and ignore it. And then when problems come out with misalignment in terms of what's being built versus what's being sold versus what's being supported, you know, you deal with those problems down the road. Those can be major headaches to try and solve. Because
they aren't even aware they have that problem.
If they're even aware of it, right? And that's a fantastic point, Jose Luis, because you know, there's really no point in our day-to-day operations where we get the opportunity to compare these notes, right? To compare these viewpoints. This misalignment may not even be evident in the typical day-to-day because there's just no time when we're actually discussing these sort of fundamentally held assumptions about what our business does or our organization does. So that's a great point, Jose Luis. It just may not even be clear that there is this misalignment until there's some major problem down the road, right? We end up having a huge customer service failure because of this misalignment. Well, it's that fundamental misalignment at the outset that led to that failure.
Right. So there's 4 options in our mind. One is you can assume everyone is aligned. The other is you can not think about it at all and just ignore it. Or you can mandate it. Like maybe the leader said, this is the answer, and everybody follow my answer. Our approach is built on the idea of getting everybody aligned by facilitating a collaboration so that they get to a clarity and alignment through getting clear by working together. So alignment is clarity reached jointly. You all seeing my screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do an example here. Adam, Jose Luis, what do you think most people think Facebook provides?
To stay in touch with friends, to share my life with them, and I get to know their life.
Let's see, it provides the opportunity for everybody in the world to see pictures of my dog.
I My dog. Okay. And you said everybody in the world.
Everyone in the world, because everybody wants to see my dog. So,
And why?
Because I want to show off.
that's it. Yeah.
I want to show off. I want to be.
Bragging.
Okay. So who pays Facebook? Facebook is a business, right? And it's actually doing quite well. Who's the buyer?
The advertisers.
Right. So who's the customer of Facebook? Maybe it's advertisers. And what do we provide advertisers?
Targeted ads.
Well, they provide the ads, right?
Leads and sales.
Do we actually give them the lead?
Sometimes, but more often it's access.
Access to.
Peter, in the chat, you have companies who want data.
Which would be the advertisers, right? And they want access to a highly targeted, segmented population, right? And the data that Facebook collects about the people that are on their system allows them to provide advertisers with a very specific population of people that advertiser is interested in. Why? To sell exactly the right product to exactly the right target prospect. So it's quite different, right?
Yes.
Well, this is what most people think, but what Facebook thinks is this. And if you were running Facebook, which would you want the people in your organizational units to think we're doing?
Interesting
Right.
question.
And what difference would it make? So the idea is that by having everybody aligned, you can pick up a lot of value by getting everybody in sync around the same message, thinking the same way, and then they do what they do to the same end. And they have their own lens and they have their own things that they do, but it's all in sync. How do you get them that way? Well, what we work with is a group of leaders who each submit their own WWW. On their own, they click a link, get a template, fill out the template, the what, who, why. And we can watch a video or read an article to organize their thinking about that. But ultimately what we want is a unified single set solution for the what, who, why. And we want to do that through a collaboration process so that we get alignment by the team working together to get clear on the same final WWW by working together. So how do we do that? Well, we have a series of steps that are guided by a facilitated process and a facilitator. So what the facilitator would do is take the initial WWWs and look at them to note themes. What are the common things that people are saying? What questions do what's been turned in raised? And looking for points of alignment and dissonance. Where are different people saying the same thing? Where are they saying different things? So the facilitator's job is to work with the team through what they've turned in light of what they do, what they provide, what they know, and what they've done to come up with a consolidated what. And the facilitator and the team will take maybe some subset of the leaders involved will take what's happened here and turn it into a trial to close. This is what we think we do. And then remember, as part of the facilitated guidance, they go for agreement, not perfection. It's not a matter of whether the WWW is right or wrong. What matters much, much more than that is if the people involved in working with coming up with the WWW agree that this is in fact reflects what they do and what they provide. So then the step 2 is to conduct another session, which could be that afternoon or another day or a week later. But the idea is it's a little bit much to try to do all of this all at once. There needs to be a step in between where there's a consolidation and then a representation of the what. So in session 2, we're going to work on the what, who, and the why. But before we get into that, we're going to revisit the what. Make sure we're comfortable with that, and then go on to say, okay, who is the buyer, and why are they the least bit interested in what we provide? And then from that session, we get a first cut at a consolidated WWW, and then what the facilitated process entails is to validate and upgrade the what, who, and why by iterating with other stakeholders, each other, maybe your board, maybe management team, maybe customers, prospects, advisors, people you go out and find that are in your space that will react to what you're saying. And the idea is to work on the ideal, not the general case. So people often tend to want to have a www that's so broad that nothing is excluded. But the reality is, the more precise you are about what you really want, the higher the probability of getting anything. So focus on the ideal, not the general. It doesn't mean you can't do other things, but what you're going to invest in trying to make happen needs to be the focus of the www.
Hey, Peter. So I was wondering how you guys think about it. I understand and appreciate the layout here, and I can envision, taking my organization through an analysis of the what, and certainly an analysis of the who. But if I take this out of the context of a product provider or a provider like Facebook and put it into the context of a solution provider, the answer to the question why varies with just about every transaction. And so I was curious to see how you guys may address that if you come at it from that angle.
Adam, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, Greg. And I work a lot with companies in a B2B context where you're offering a particular solution. There actually are layers of who's that will have different whys as part of that type of transaction engagement. So for example, you may have your budget holder who is responsible for figuring out how to solve a certain problem and applying a budget toward that. You'll have the user community within the organization, which is looking to say be hands-on with the problem and solve it. But you have a bunch of other influencers and people who have a hand in that as well. Obviously all the way up to a CEO or board level in some instances, depending on the scope of the problem or the solution, that sort of thing. So you need to be thinking through sort of that web, if you will, of who's. And then each one should ultimately allow you to arrive at a why. It matters to them. Okay.
Yeah. In the art of the complex sale, there are actually many decisions that are being made. Each of those has someone making it. And so the idea is whichever one you're dealing with, even if it's different in every organization, it could be different in different parts of the organization. You're still going to need to get to the why.
Totally agree, and totally agree with the stakeholder kind of approach that you're articulating there for a given client and a given transaction. But then my answer is going to change when I go to my next client and develop my next.
It might, it might, but it also, you might realize that there are patterns, right? And that there's probably more than one buyer or prospect that thinks similarly. And that's what we're looking for.
That's a fair point. I guess my real challenge is how do I get to alignment on an answer to that question in a process such as that?
I was just going to say that the way I've worked through this with some companies, that what you end up with are a series of packaged solutions, and you use sort of a classic solution selling model where you may build a campaign around a given solution set, so that as your team is prospecting, you're engaging, and you're learning that here are the particular pain points, here are the particular jobs to be done within that environment, that then that package is what gets put forward. And, obviously it's not going to fit, nothing's going to be a perfect fit to it, but it should be close enough that
Right.
you can, kind of drive that engagement.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I like that perspective, and that maybe the outcome here is multivariate for the why. And if you think about it in terms of packages of solutions in a portfolio, you could have multiple whys. Potentially, it's very similar what and who, but multiple whys on the back end. That's very helpful. Thank you.
That's great. Yes, and you nailed it. That's exactly the approach that I've helped companies implement.
Essentially, you end up with multiple WWWs, right? And each one is possibly a market. The question is how many who's are there? So what we're looking for are, if you remember the template here, you seeing this?
Mm-hmm.
So remember, we're looking for people, but the problem needs to be important. You can't not solve it. You got to solve it. It's pervasive, meaning a lot of people have it, and it doesn't go away with the passage of time. So I think you could end up with sort of patterns in the problem here, where you might have a certain class of buyers that are in a certain situation that defines one market, another class and another. If I was going to choose which ones to work on, I'd probably want to pick the one that, for whom it is most important and pervasive and persistent. Because I think the problem is it's very difficult to work on many at the same time. So our guidance is almost always, if you have multiple WWWs, and you're essentially defining a case where you have that, pick one and work on that one first until it's no longer the right one to be working on, and then go on, or until you're done, you've penetrated the market fully, go on to the next one. Adam, you had a few of the tips here.
Yeah. Well, in fact, Greg gave me a great lead in with this question, because some of these actually are directly those points that we were just discussing. So I'll actually start at the bottom of this, which is that there can be layers of who's, or stakeholders, as Greg termed it, that have different problems and different motivations for solving them. That they will be part of that same decision chain or influencing the decision chain, They may be users and people who are directly hands-on with the problem and need the solution. They may be economic buyers, budgetary buyers, that sort of thing. But there can be layers of who's, and so you do need to think through that sort of web, if you will, of who's. And a simple illustration of this is that a parent buying a toy for their child will reflect that difference, right? They both want the toy, but they want it for different reasons and they have different motivations. The child obviously wants to play with it and is excited to play with it. The parent may be just buying, 10 minutes of peace. So, it is reflecting that there are different motivations, different needs, and actually slightly different problems that they're solving with the same purchase. A couple other quick points. Obviously, I speak of this as a marketer, and particularly a B2B marketer. This is an important opportunity to really refine the focus on the market. And in the process of iterating on the WWW, you actually start to clarify that, wow, here's a different segment that we actually have been addressing in some way. If we were to put focus on that, build it into its own WWW, as Peter's saying, and create a campaign to go after that, that could be a huge growth opportunity for us. So it actually is a marketing exercise in addition to an alignment exercise. The other point, other key points here for the best, strongest WWWs is to make sure as much as you can that you're stating it from the customer's point of view. The Facebook exercise that we just walked through is exactly the way to be thinking about this, okay? It's not what you're selling, not so much what you are, think that you're selling from your point of view, but it's about the problem that you're solving for the customer. And then the last part, and this is often hard to do, but the best WWWs we've seen will actually capture that emotional or aspirational element, sort of the spark that actually can be the key to the business model. The example here is Starbucks, right? I'm buying coffee, but I'm willing to part with $7 for a cup of coffee, right? And why is that? It's because Starbucks has recognized that I actually want an experience. That lack of the moment where I'm in the environment and it's cool and I'm relaxed and everything is sort of, all aligned around this experience for me, that I'm willing to part with that $7 for a cup of brown water. So that's part of it. It's thinking through how does that customer view this emotionally and what's going to get them to engage.
So to wrap up the content here, what we want to point out is that what we find is preparing the WWW in getting where you are all aligned on a single articulation of what, who, why. Sounds easy. It can't be done generally in an afternoon or an hour. It takes concentrated effort over a period of time, and it's harder than it first looks. That said, it's not hard for a team to work on. It's actually quite straightforward. Any facilitator can get to the point where they can work with a team to help point out the inconsistencies in what they're saying, the points of dissonance and alignment, and to facilitate that process, not evaluating it right or wrong, but looking for alignment. But it takes real effort to do that, and desire on the part of leadership to work on it. And the question then gets raised, is it worth the trouble? We find incredibly so that it is. It's worth the trouble for the team to work on their WWW because they grow as a team in so doing. And the clarity and the alignment ripples through the organization. And all of a sudden you have the power of a diverse complement of strengths all being applied to the same ultimate goal. And you get enormous productivity improvement. And all of this works towards, remember what we said, alignment comes from clarity reached jointly. So let me just tell you a little bit about where this fits into the bigger picture. We mentioned that MTL is a system. And what we've talked about right now is the first cornerstone of that system. There's what we call the do, sell, grow processes, and how does the organization do what it does, create demand for what it does, and increase capacity to do what it does and create demand for what it does. And then there's what do you watch to know how well you're doing? The metrics of performance to evaluate the performance of your business over time, over the past, how you're actually performing relative to plan, and then how you're performing relative to others like you or peers, so past, plan, and peers. And then who do you count on for what in your organization? And once you have defined your organization in terms of these 4 dimensions of your business, you can then say, well, how do we want those things to be? And why do we want to be different than we are today? And what do we need to do to get there? What's going to be hard about that? And now you put together what we call the change framework that drives a set of initiatives to move from the current to the target state. So the system helps you run the business as it is today and set up to get to a future state by setting up and driving, launching, and guiding a series of initiatives in a programmatic way to get there. So what MTL system does on balance is arm an executive team with best practices for two things: leading an operation and changing the organization in a planned way. And you do it by doing three things: getting clear about what they're doing as a whole, as put together, and as individuals in the whole. And then being aligned on their WWW, do, sell, grow, what they're watching to know how well they're doing, who they're counting on for what, and what they're trying to do to go from today to tomorrow. And on track, ultimately, from all of that to reach the potential to perform and grow. So as Jose Luis mentioned, we have a lot of success in doing all of this. And I'm not going to go through these unless you have a question, but I will tell you that through all of this, there's really a small set of really key things that we've learned that really put the rigor behind all of this. One is that amazing things happen, amazingly good things happen with focus. When you're doing just trying to do one thing, you take a team of people who are good at different things related to what needs to be done and get them clear about all those different dimensions of the business and working together, amazing things can happen. But even small differences in how that top team thinks about those things, understands those things, and works in light of those things, small differences make a huge impact and in a negative way on what's going on in the organization. And that the leader's choice in all of this is to either ignore it, assume it's fine, mandate it to be one way or another, or work together to figure it out and get aligned and on track. And what we find is that little bit of guidance in the system and the tools and the methods and the principles that we bring to the table through MTL apply equally well to any organization doing anything, whether it's a nonprofit, a government agency, a telco, a software company. It really doesn't matter. These things we're talking about pervade any organization. And it's really about the people, how they're thinking, how they're working together to work on all of this. And what's interesting is they're all simple and they're all intuitive, but they're hard to do. And what we've done to make it easy to do, or at least doable, is provide tools. So the Manage to Lead system has tools, methods, and principles that you can access on the Intelligence site in the toolbox. And they're all there, all for free. You can also get help, because what we have is an immersion academy where we will run you through a training program with your case to give you an amazing experience putting all this to work on your situation. Or we're also available to provide what we call side-by-side accelerator support to in-flight initiatives, where we'll put a team of people who are trained in all of this to work with your team to help you apply all of this to whatever it is you're doing, increasing the odds that you'll be successful in what you're doing and that you will learn how to do this, and then you can spread it out in the future for future years. So with now, I'll turn it over to all of you who want to jump in and maybe share some of your experience or some of your questions about all of this.
I have one question. This process is designed to help companies to get aligned, no matter the size of the company. But let's assume that I am a middle-level manager. I have 7 direct reports, and those direct reports also have their own direct reports.
Right.
It's not a huge organization, but I have a team that I lead, and I am a manager. So what would you tell somebody like me to, I already listened to you, I already learned what I learned from you today. How could you put it in simple words, so to speak, so that I can maybe go to your website, use some of the tools that you mentioned that are available, and go back to my team and align my entire team?
Leslie?
I'm Leslie, and I'm a consultant, and I was called in to work with a small mid-sized company after COVID hit, and they had to let 50% of their staff go. And they asked me to help reorganize and restructure the company, which was the best thing that could have happened to them in the long run. And so having been in conversation with Peter, I was the facilitator who ran the WWW through this. It's a speakers bureau here in Santa Barbara. And it was phenomenal, because what happened was exactly as he described it. I gave them their homework, they came back, different purposes, who's, what's, whys, etc. But through the process that I walked them through, and it took several sessions, as a speakers bureau, they were focusing on who are we selling to, which were our event planners, because they sell some pretty high-end speakers. And what came out of this is they actually have three who's. They have the event planners, and then they have the high-end speakers that they can book that generate a lot of money, that are well-known. And then they have the non-exclusive speakers, the one who come in one and done. And that thinking changed everything for them in terms of who are we serving and what are we providing for them.
So Jose Luis's question gets right at, like, how did you convince them to do it?
I had been their executive coach before COVID hit. And so when it hit, they're like, we need help. And I said, okay, then are you willing to follow my lead and trust what I'm going to bring here? Because I had an established relationship, and they said yes. So that counted for a lot.
Well, one of the things we find is that everybody thinks what they think. And they think, I've got a very well-developed understanding of my business. I know how it's working. I assume you have the same. So what our best move is not to have them go to the site and get some kind of inspiration. It's simply to ask them, let's take the leader. Do you know what you're trying to do? Yes. Do the people that work with you on your top team know what you're trying to do? Yes. How do you know? Let's check. No big deal. We'll just give them this form. It takes 5 minutes, each one of them fill it out. Let's just see what comes back. And what happens is the leader goes into that thinking everybody's going to say exactly what they said. What comes back is a mess. And that's when Leslie gets her job. Right? Now, let's say the leader says, I don't know what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to figure it out. Well, we do the same thing. We say, well, you know what? Let's get everybody's best thinking on the table and let's work with it. So either way, it works. And if we can get somebody interested in just checking, that's all we need. And then it flows from there. But the odds that we can watch Adam's explainer video or go to the site and see the tool and see what others have done with it, none of those things seem to light the flame and get it off and running. You have to experience it, which is why we make the advanced exercise available. Encourage you all and everybody else after this session to go and fill it out. Go fill out the template. It's in the advanced exercise. Have your team fill it out. Doesn't cost anything, right? There's no cost, no obligation. Send it in and we will mark it up with at least 3 constructive comments. Now, Joyce knows because she's worked with this process with many organizations. And she keeps going back to me, is it right? Is it right now? Is it right now? I keep saying, no, I can tell you what comes to my mind when I look at it, but I can't tell you if it's right or wrong. The only thing that matters is if everybody agrees with it. But take these words and take it into the process and see what they think. Right, Joyce?
Oh, right. Well, I'm helping somebody who is doing a startup in DEI and has a really incredible framework that's very powerful that has 6 factors to it. And so she's building it as she goes, but then she also realized that each one of those segments could be a product. It was like a aha that we had a couple of weeks ago. And so she said, well, but when I do it that way, the market for it is different and all of this sort of stuff. And so we sat down and we did a WWW just for this new idea. And then what we realized is that, so that could either be a product or it could be a strategic initiative, whatever it is that you're focusing on. And so that was new, and we did that. And then we realized that she has her one for what her original firm was going to be around the DEI, because this has to do with new manager integration. So it's two totally different things, but they do flow together. So now the next step is really to look at, well, what is the WWW for her overall consulting firm?
Right.
Rather than, so she started with this kind of product, but by going back, and what we do that I find very useful is we keep a historical record. We put the WWW into 3 columns and a 4th column for the date. And so you put down what your what is, and by having that, you can go back, and we went back and we found some words from one of the original ones that would, oh yeah. So we're still working on that enterprise one, but it really helps you focus your efforts, especially as Adam was saying about the who, because your who determines what activities you're going to do in order to sell. And so you have to be really clear around that.
There's a WWW for the whole organization. Then there's a WW for each of these boxes inside. And you would want the ones inside to be rational relative to the whole, which is difficult if there isn't one for the whole. Yeah. So if there isn't one for the whole, you have to assume something about the whole while you bring order to your corner of the world.
I think that's actually a really key point, and it was what I think Jose Luis was driving at, is that absolutely a unit within a larger company, which has a middle-level manager and some direct reports, as long as they have different responsibilities that must be aligned, it absolutely will apply to them. And the WWW absolutely can help them get in alignment.
The risk is that they will create what we call an island of sanity, where they'll have it figured out and they'll do great. But what happens to the rest of the organization is hopefully they'll see what's going on there and they'll want to do it too. Let me turn it over to Peggy. You had something from the chat.
Two things in the chat. Can you address what to do, what it means if the why is not particularly virtuous?
Not virtuous?
It's not virtuous.
Run away with your hands up in the air screaming? Like, can you give me an example? What do you think they mean?
That was my question. And I find a lot of times the why seems to be something like, because they don't know of other options, or you know, something that's actually, if you identified it, would probably keep you up at night. Just thought that was
good point.
Yeah.
Adam, Mark, did you want to weigh in on that? He was the last one. Adam, did you want to respond to Melissa?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's if the why is because they're buying you out of ignorance, then you kind of have to ask yourself, well, you know, as you become more successful, as others become more successful in the market space, what if that ignorance goes away? And do you still have a compelling value proposition and reason for why they're going to be buying it? So, you know, it's, as Peter's saying, that over time, you actually kind of revisit this and adjust and think about that. And if at some point you say, hey, market awareness of this particular type of solution has expanded to the point that, you know, ignorance is no longer a driving reason as to why they're buying us, right? So we need to think through. And if you don't have a compelling reason as to why an informed consumer would buy your product or service, then maybe you need to move on to a different business, because it's you can't be dependent on that sort of ignorance, if you will, forever.
Hey, you want to hit us
in a growing market?
Another one, Peg?
This one's a little bit more of a comment, saying the key word for me is change, how the system and process facilitates change, but also acknowledges that there's a current state from where you are to where you need to be.
And one of the things we're consolidating in the way of an insight here is it's two things. It's running well what you have today, and also change. So it's operational excellence in sync with your stage of venture maturity. Because as you grow and become successful and increase in scope and scale, the responsibilities change. What you need from leadership change, what you need to do is different. So at these inflection points, you need to get to that next level, and the system helps you do that. And then that drives you to need to do things differently, which drives initiatives, which are also enhanced and supported by the system's tools, methods, and principles. So it's really two things, and both things are keyed with alignment. So when everybody's running the business, running the same business and their piece of it fits into a whole that's all rational, that they all understand, odds go up, success go up. Same thing with an initiative. Jose Luis, did you want to ask another question?
Actually, that was my main question, and I love the answer because it's very, very operational, very practical for people who are not familiar with the work you do. It was great.
I wanted to ask Michael Kennedy, who's on here, who's recently gone through this himself with John, who's also here. Michael, did you want to say a few words about your experience with the process? If he's still there, we may have lost him.
I notice he's on, his video is off, so he may be.
But he's also on mute. John, do you want to speak up?
Yeah, so we started a project with CompuSult. I want to say it was right around the first part of March. And what we wanted to do is look at how we could grow the US presence of the Canadian founded firm. And so we worked with Michael Kennedy on the who, what, why around an alignment on how we take the software product that was developed and is being added to in Canada and expand that US footprint. And what we realized that the US subsidiary really didn't have a good idea about the product. And through a set of conversations and demos and building a capabilities presentation and targeting, you know, we came to clarity around that.
Michael's back now, and I think he'll speak to that. Michael told us, give us your quote, Michael. What were you able to do in 5 weeks that you hadn't been able to do in 5 years?
Yeah, so sorry about that. I had to step away. I had a phone call. So yeah, I gotta say, the biggest thing is I've been with this company for a little over 5 years, and we accomplished more in 5 weeks than I have in 5 years with this company prior. So going through the WWW was more than eye-opening to work with the parent company, work with the board, get the input from the intelligent leaders to guide us through it and facilitate it to one piece that, like you guys said before, agreement.
Right.
There's no right, there's no wrong, but everyone was agreed this is the proper one.
Now, your Canadian owner is more or less known for being a little bit difficult for you to deal with from time to time. So my question, picking up on Jose Luis's question earlier, is how did you get him to do it?
I gotta say, we had to schedule meetings every single week, and that was the biggest thing to keep them engaged. And besides having the weekly meetings scheduled and they actually dedicated their time to it, we had the little sidebar conversations with other people from the parent company's organization to keep it moving forward.
But there was something intriguing about it. Once we got them to fill out the form, which wasn't easy initially, but once it was like, this is interesting. Let's dig in here. And then, oh my goodness, people, they really don't know what we're talking about. Let's try to help them. It's quite interesting. Peggy, anything else from the chat that we should pick up on before we wrap up?
Yeah, thanks for asking. There is one more that's building on the virtuous question, noting that employees, especially the newer generation, seek meaning in their work, and how important is it to tie the why to some sort of greater good?
Yeah. Again, I think, because you're talking about employees, it relates to the do and the grow, right? Because how are you going to increase the capacity of your organization to do what it does if you don't have people that work there, right? So that just becomes part of that. That doesn't necessarily drive the why a customer buys, but it could. If that was what it took, then that's what I'd have to deal with, right? So I'd want to be doing something that was not just something somebody wanted, but something somebody wanted for a good reason.
Right. So part of the why in cases might actually be because you do have a broader good that you're serving.
Right.
And I think there is instance of that being more and more important given where the world is going these days. And it is something to take into consideration.
But one of our, I think I should mention, the system is being used now very broadly. And I want to point out, so we have, in addition to helping organizations now that have populations of employees that are rooted in technical backgrounds that have become very successful, thinking of your likes of Google, Amazon, so on. You have scientists, economists, biologists. They're now in organizations that are asking these people who have very little background in business or in people to all of a sudden become leaders and managers, and we help them with this system to increase their competence capacity in both. We have one user using it to improve patient engagement for quality healthcare. Another is using it, as Michael and John talked about, for developing their sales process. We have several that are doing that. And Joyce mentioned the DEI, but the one I wanted to point out is this homelessness one. The team that came through our immersion program academy has taken as their case in the course and then afterwards asked for us to help them use this whole system to end homelessness in San Francisco. And we facilitated 3 major sessions with 50 stakeholders from different organizational units across the city, all bearing on this one problem. What could they do together that they were not able to do on their own to help progress towards ending homelessness? And their progress in success in this initiative is phenomenal. And they owe a lot of that, they say, to having worked with MTL, the system, and with us helping them to apply it. And my final thought would be, go back to the 4 things you can do. You can ignore the problem, you can assume everything's fine, or you can mandate the solution. And if you think about it as a leader of anything, why would you do any of those 3 as opposed to draw out the best thinking of those that you're working with and their diverse mindsets and abilities, put it on the table to collaborate, to work together to get to the next level in whatever it is you're trying to do. So as a leader, what I've learned is that I only know what I know, but when I work with my whole team in a collective manner like that, an individual leader becomes a collective leader. The power of that and what that group can do is mind-boggling. So I would encourage you to think that way and to look at the tools provided by MTL as facilitating that process, and then bless you from there to achieve your potential to perform and grow.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you. It has been a real pleasure. I learned something new, definitely, very practical, simple, not easy, but simple.
Simple but not easy, exactly. But we make it doable. That's the key.
Doable.
That's correct,
Yeah.
yes. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and talk to you later.